Hello, welcome to the 6th episode of the Dragon's Pen podcast about fantasy writing, sci-fi writing, and other genre-specific writing. My name is Martin, I am a fantasy writer myself, and I have spent years attending and leading workshops working with aspiring writers to help them understand how to improve their texts. I thought I might share my experience and give you some advice on how to develop your worlds, build your stories and characters, and help you write your own fantasy or sci-fi saga. So let's get to it. Title of today's episode is The Exposition Files, and it will be all about exposition. Let me explain. You might have heard the term exposition a few times, especially when it comes to writing, or maybe in movies and game story writing. You might even heard the term exposition dump. Exposition is explaining, or in many cases, over-explaining the background of events that are happening right now in your text. Pretty much the opposite of what I was talking about in a previous episode, the show don't tell approach. So, for example, a hero is saved by a mysterious stranger. Afterwards, they sit down and stranger proceeds to explain that the hero is a long-lost descendant of ancient order of warriors. And the stranger goes something like this.
It was the year 1254 when the evil came from the mountains to the west. The kingdom had its own problems at the time. It was at the height of the civil war between elves and humans. Then the ruling king had no easy way of stopping the evil. The armies were spread too thinly all over the country. There was only one solution the king could think, and it was dynamite. He joined forces with the enemy, the greedy grandmaster of the Golden Fist. The evil was gathering strength and building armies of horrible beings. Even the grandmaster saw through his greed and hatred for the elves. There was no other way other than join forces with the king. There would be no Abigail, no joining of the armies. The hatred and mistrust was too deeply rooted. Soldiers would kill one another long before they would face. The two leaders find a way and created a new order. The order of choice makers. Half elves, half humans. Able to wield powerful and ancient earth magic just like their elf brethren. And equipped with the best weapons ever created by humans. You are the long-lost descendant of this forgotten order. You are the last choice maker.
Ooh, dramatic, isn't it? You can almost see the dull blue video unfolding in the background while the voiceover continues. And that's exactly what many movies actually do. Do you know why? Because otherwise it would be boring as hell. So how do you make exposition interesting, captivating, and informative at the same time? How can you make it worth your reader's time? History or mythos expositions are the ones I usually encounter when reading fantasy or sci-fi texts from aspiring authors, similar to the one I just provided you with. I am quite certain you wrote something like that in your earlier works, so how do you deal with these? Well, let's first analyze them a little bit. I hate this, don't you? It's like, let me give you the answer you are looking for, but first, listen to me blab on for another 5 minutes. Okay, so the answer is, without any analyzing, you have to use your exposition to provide fuel for the story. Not so helpful without context, is it? It is very interconnected with show don't tell principle from the last episode. Maybe check it out if you haven't already done so. The topic of exposition is actually pretty deep, just like show don't tell principle from the last episode. Maybe you want to check it out if you haven't done so. Same as with those, we kind of have to dig pretty deep to understand how to deal with expositions in your story. So why don't we just use show don't tell all the time and get rid of all the exposition in the story? Yeah, but that would not be ideal. You have to realize exposition is just like any other tool in your writing bat belt. And as any tool, it has its uses. That's why, it exists. That's why it has a fancy name. But it still has a bit of a reputation. And exposition is a prime example of these singularity storytelling techniques getting bad reputation for no other reason other than being very overused in popular culture. You have dozens of movies that are just bustling with those huge exposition dumps where one character straight up tells the rest of the gang and the audience what is going on, or what was going on before, or an exposition with a twist, like a news section. So many zombie movies start with like quickly cut news reports to show you the beginning of a zombie virus pandemic. Usually there's absolutely no point to it other than kinda setting the mood. Then you hear people review it and talk about too much exposition in a movie, and you kinda get the feeling that exposition is just straight up bad for, the medium, for the text, for your writing. And that's not true at all. Problem with exposition is the overuse, and more specifically, the overuse of the same exact form of exposition where one character straight up tells the rest of the story to the other one and the audience. So I got it. It's a very simple tool to get a hang of. Very straightforward, very easy. Way easier than, let's say, show don't tell principle from the last episode. Many works of aspiring authors are just straight up exposition overkills. I get that it's an easy tool to work with, but still, why is that? Well, for that, we need to analyze a bit. I'm sorry, but we really do. Think about where the expositions are actually coming from. It is one character, or maybe author directly, sharing crucial information with another character, usually the main hero of the story. Did you notice the keyword in there? Crucial. That is the issue here. Crucial to the story for the character, not for anything else. What does our hero truly needs to know from the monologue of the stranger that saved him? With all, it's 1255 and Civil War and stuff like that. Well, actually, he needs to know much less than you might think. The hero needs to know, first of all, him having a mysterious tattoo means he can do elven magic. The second thing, he is the best equipped individual to defeat the evil and save the world. And that's it. Kinda underwhelming, isn't it? All the history stuff, the mythos stuff, the world building stuff, everything else is just kind of a fluff around the crucial information in there to make it more believable. It is a bit of a cliche, and it doesn't really make much sense if you think about it. Why would my hero, that is going to be saving the world soon, trust a stranger with nice historical presentation out of the blue? Well, Martin, because he feels like he should be stopping the evil anyway, and he has this weird tattoo and he was born with, and nobody can really tell or explain why he's there. Yeah, but a stranger just comes along and gives him the purpose he's looking for, gives him all the answers by telling him the, story. What if the stranger is just straight up lying, made up the whole thing? Okay, I can maybe add some nonsense like, the stranger's eyes were deep and the truth was obvious in them. Or hero knew in his heart that the stranger is right. There, bulletproof. Now our main hero can discover the responsibility, check his ego and start, being a hero and saving the world. Pretty much next Lord of the Rings, just waiting to be turned into 12 hours of awesome cinematic. I gotta say though, the story of a young hero being straight up told he has to save the world by a stranger that helped him not die is nowhere near as interesting as a story about two opposing leaders in the middle of the Civil War finding a common ground and setting up new warrior order of choice makers. That is a story I kind of want to hear, I kind of want to know more about, rather than the story about young dude being told to save the world. Why is that? How come the background story for actual story is somewhat more engaging and more captivating? Well, the answer is fairly simple, really. It has the beginning, the middle, the twist, the end. It is nice, complete story with a lot of gaps that the reader just automatically fills in with his mind, aka engage with. For example, how did the first meeting between those two opposing leaders go? It was probably pretty intense yet necessary for both parties. Both great leaders needed to give up a bit of their ego, grow as a character, even though they both knew no one will remember them because they only provided the tools to save the world. The choice makers did the saving. It is a huge sacrifice if you think about it for a leader. Not all leaders would have done it. All this was said in between the lines of the stranger's monologue. The reader had to fill in those blanks in for themselves, and that's what's engaging about it. Plus, it is pretty simple to come up with captivating story when you create it on a very high level. There is not as much writing itself to deal with. It is mostly world building, and world building is fun. Those two things are pretty much the main reason why aspiring authors overuse exposition. It is a bit like, hey, I made this amazing world for you, you need to hear about it. Plus, the fact that the high-level outlines of stories tend to be very captivating, since there is a lot our brain just naturally fills in as we read it. But it is just not enough to actually carry the scene, mostly because I am following the main character, the hero. I, as a reader, have some relationship with them. I am actually more interested in what's gonna happen to the hero rather than stuff that happened very long time ago. I mean, it's nice and all, but it does not really tell me what is my hero going to do. The hero is given a choice, and how he decides and why is actually the part I, as a reader of your story, am more interested in. Another issue with these characters or exposition devices that have all the answers is that they have all the answers. This is actually a big problem for aspiring authors in sci-fi and fantasy I have met with many times. There is literally nothing stopping our hero from pulling out a notebook and pen and going like, okay, so you seem to know what you're talking about, so what do I do next? And that is the point where aspiring authors usually think to themselves, damn, now I have to kill this sucker off before he blabs everything to my hero. Or it becomes this sort of intermittent exposition, like hero getting only pieces of answers and the stranger is disappearing in dreams, or the stranger kinda just comes around, you are the chosen one. Okay, gotta go, bye. Or the exposition character dies mid-sentence to make the hero work for the answer. You know, stuff like, you have to go there and you'll find... I understand the struggle. On one hand, you want to have this all-knowing stranger, this all-knowing exposition device, because it is very convenient. But on the other hand, you don't want them spilling the beans too soon. So how do you deal with this issue? Well, usually pretty badly. It just doesn't make sense for someone to just drop by and, you know, tell very important piece of information. Something like, the fate of the world hangs in the balance, but you are just not ready yet to hear the rest of it. You know, we are only in chapter 5. You can pull old Gandalf, gotta go find more before I tell you, on the main hero, but it is also kinda overused. Or the old cliche with an ancient prophecy that is too abstract and metaphorical to give hero proper instructions up front. I have seen so many of those, so many aspiring authors, especially in fantasy, spend hours coming up with these little prophecy riddle-ridden poems. It is a huge cliche. Another problem with these intermittent expositions is that it is pretty frustrating for the reader. It feels like there is something unfinished just hanging around while you read, and you need to grind through the story to get to the answers your hero is looking for, the answers you should have heard long before that. It would be having a character say only half of the sentence and then just go away. Now again, this could be a very useful and powerful tool, but this is exactly what it has to be. A tool, not a quick patch to fix your, exposition problems and timing problems. If you plan on using all-knowing exposition device, person or prophecy, you should make sure it is not a frustrating experience for your reader. So how do you deal with exposition when you need it in your text? How do you make it informative, interesting, and not frustrating for your reader? Exposition can take many forms. We already talked about using newsreels as an exposition device. That is a very common one. Or maybe an ancient prophecy. Again, a very common one. There is obviously a monologue, just like the one you heard from the stranger. The form of the exposition can be its turning point and make it into a captivating piece of writing. It doesn't have to be the cliche, unexpected ally that explains what's going on sitting around a fire. There is a lot you can do with the form itself, let's say making the stranger character very interesting, almost more captivating than the main character. Have the stranger steal the show for a chapter or two. Like, let's say, the Elminster in the Baldur's Gate game, the first one. You just stumble upon a character that is just like this old annoying guy, but turns out to be very powerful wizard. Or you can introduce tension by making the exposition character very untrustworthy. Is the hero going to follow their advice? Why? And that's just playing with the form of the exposition. It is your world, your text. You can pretty much do anything you feel like doing. But the best way to handle exposition is to make it feel like it is not exposition at all. I remember there's one scene in Terry Pratchett's Discworld where the librarian has to explain circumstances of a book being stolen. But the librarian is an orangutan. Yeah, read Discworld novels. It is just, if you haven't already, it's a fantastic piece of writing. So, librarian being an orangutan, he can't really talk. So instead of a sit down and explanation, you get a ridiculously hysterical game of charades where one character straight up tries to guess the exposition. You are having so much fun as a reader, you completely forget you are actually in the middle of an exposition section. Or think about Hercule Poirot novels from Agatha Christie. The cult whodunit with the mansion full of potential killers. Basically, any interview with the suspect is an exposition in its core. But there is a lot of tension. Basically, everyone can be the killer. Everyone could be lying to the detective. The detective character is trying to move the investigation forward, but at the same time trying to not show their entire hand to the potential killer, and the killer tries to save their own skin. Plus, as a reader, you are interested in what is the detective going to do with the gathered information, the way the detective thinks, their decision-making, deduction skills. All the exposition just provides fuel for the story. Without it, the detective character could not possibly move on with the investigation because, they need information, they need the interviews, they need to know the suspects. And that is exactly what you are aiming for, providing fuel for the story, not sharing your world-building ideas or mythos or your world. Sure, it can be a part of it. I mean, for fantasy and sci-fi, it is pretty much, given. It has to be a part of it. So some world building should be in the mix, but it shouldn't be the primary motive in your exposition. The primary motive should be providing the fuel for the story. Think about it this way. We work with the same example for a bunch of episodes now because it really fits and it's very much like the ones I often encounter when reading early works of aspiring authors. So we have Alex, the hero with mysterious tattoo or a mark he was born with. his teenage crush, Brianna, and the ancient evil rising to power in the mountains nearby. Their home village is destroyed in the attack of the evil forces and minions or monsters or whatever. They save themselves. They are the sole survivors of the massacre. They successfully ran away from danger. But what now? There are two characters with very different motivation and very different kind of character setup. Alex, the hero, feels like there is something important, a fate here awaiting him. Brianna, on the other hand, is broken about losing her home, her family, and basically her entire life. So what happens next? How does the story go? It's kind of ran its course based on what the characters and the reader know. So the story needs, you guessed it, fuel. I can put in a stranger in the mix that knows everything, but it is too soon for Alex to get all the answers. So I can put maybe a little exposition, only a little fuel to get the story just going on smoothly. They can run into, let's say, a group of elves. It provides an opportunity for me as a writer to kind of put in a little work on how the elf-human relationship in their world works. There is, a lot of racial disparity, there is a lot of tension, a lot of mistrust. So the elves at first are torn, between helping people in need, but on the other hand, helping humans who they despise. So they want to help the kids, obviously, but at the same time, they are very distant. But then the elves see the mark on Alex's skin. All of a sudden, their demeanor changes. Neither the character nor the reader is really entitled to the explanation because, it just doesn't fit with the nature of the elves to explain themselves out of nowhere, plus they are strangers, but they can provide a clue, a little fuel for the story. Something like, if you are a true friend of the elven kind, you have to prove it. And if you want our help, you go to this place because there is a marking similar to yours. That's pretty much all we need to know at this point. We don't need what the mark means or what is the place. It is just a way for main characters to get help from strangers, the elves. And all of a sudden, the story has a little bit of mystery added with very little exposition. Plus, the situation that follows can provide you with fantastic opportunity for character development for Alex, maybe explore a bit more about his relationship with Brianna. So there you go. This was an exposition on how to deal with exposition in your texts. Thank you for listening. Good luck with your writing, and hopefully you were at least a little bit inspired.